Good morning, people. I yet don't know what the title of this video is going to be, so by the time I post and upload this video, I think you'll be familiar with the title of this video, and I'll make sure that I'll create a title that justifies or that encapsulates what I'm going to talk about. So just read the title. So obviously, I'm going to speak about Christopher Nolan's latest film, Tenet. To say that Tenet is complicated is an understatement. Of course, any Christopher Nolan film is complicated, and you don't have two ways about it. The fact is that he doesn't underestimate the intelligence of the audience, and I think it's worked out so far. So what makes Tenet complicated is every part of it. It has a complicated story, it has a complicated plot structure, and the science in it is also very complicated. But I think that the videos on YouTube right now are speaking about the complexity of the plot, of the structure, and all the things in between it. But the complexity, or at least the lack thereof of the complexity, which is in actual what is the focus of this video, is not actually explored by most of the videos. So that's why I thought I would take some time and try and implore what is special about the science within this film. We already know that whenever we watch a Christopher Nolan film, the amount of time we spend on watching the said film is less than the amount of time we spend pondering on how and what the hell the film actually meant. And in this case, it's more or less the same. So yeah, all the introductions aside, what am I actually talking about? I'm talking about time travel. So when we look at film in general, the way time travel is depicted in films hasn't actually entirely covered the spectrum of how time travel actually happens. See, the most conventional form of time travel that is usually depicted in cinema is actually far more complicated than what seems to be complicated in Tenet. For example, when you look at films like Back to the Future, or any film where the hero or the protagonist just jumps ahead into the future or to the backwards timeline, we find that it actually happens through some sort of higher dimensional portal. Christopher Nolan himself worked on the theory of the fifth dimension in Interstellar. But taking time travel into the fifth dimension and talking about sciences that deal with the fifth dimension and wormholes and time portals is kind of stretching it. If we look at time travel without these complexities, we understand that Tenet is a much more plausible situation. Of course, time travel isn't plausible. We are living in a world where it's just a realm of fiction as of now. So when I'm speaking about plausible scenarios, what I essentially mean is I'm comparing the types of time travel that has been shown in cinema, in literature, and to what is being depicted in the film Tenet. I forgot to mention a spoiler warning. I guess I'll just add it in the title. And if I've already added, I will seem stupid because it's under the title. So I'm sorry. So coming back to my concept of time travel being different in Tenet, what I mean is that we find that generally in Hollywood film or in mainstream time travel works, most of them at least, when a person tries to travel from point A to point B, what actually happens is that he disappears from point A and somehow reappears at point B. This more than usually happens when he travels through a higher medium. We find he travels through a wormhole, or there is some sort of machine that doesn't have much explanation, but still that's what happens. But we find that whenever two objects, at least not in the realm of quantum physics of course, which happens in Avengers Endgame, but that's another story, but whenever we find that we need to move from one point of time to the other, or one point of space to the other, we should understand that we should go through the distance between the two in order to reach the other point. So when it comes to physics, we have to understand the first point, which is that time and space should be thought of alike, which means that if you essentially want to go back or forward in time, in order to reach from point A to point B, you have to experience the middle. But the amount of time you use to actually experience the middle changes. For example, the very first time travel literature that is recorded as a form of a novel is H.G. Wells's The Very Famous Time Machine, and it is one of my favorite works. And in that, the protagonist moves around 8 million years ahead into the future. But when he goes from the present time to the future, he actually experiences the entire 8 million years as 8 hours. So he's actually going through time as space, albeit a bit faster. So how does Tenet work around into all of this? In fact, the film did nothing much in terms of disposition. Compared to a typical Christopher Nolan film, the amount of disposition that is actually there within this film is very minimal. And each and every time an explanation seems to come up, it is immediately shunned down by a character or two saying that, is your head hurting? I'm not going to actually explain it, you have to just feel it. So when we look at the kind of explanation, we find certain key terms which help us to understand what type of time travel they are essentially talking about, and it comes to deal with something called entropy. So what is entropy? If you just Google around the word entropy, the definition is self-explanatory. It is the idea that things tend to get more complicated as time passes. Now, how does this tie in with the film? The idea that time is space and that higher dimensional beings do not experience time as the way we experience time is already set up in previous films of Christopher Nolan. So when you understand Interstellar, you understand that time for them is a movable entity. But when we can move through space, the experience of moving through space doesn't have any other higher dimension involved within it. Which means, for example, a two-dimensional being cannot move in space in the third dimension. In the same way, a three-dimensional being like us cannot move in time freely. But if we can move in time, we can only move in time as we can move in space. Which means, in reality, for example, you have to go from point A to point B, you have to go through the entire space that is between A and B. And that is essentially what happens in Tenet. If you want to go from today to yesterday, you have to go through from today to yesterday, which means you have to live the time albeit in the opposite direction. So what does this all mean? It just means that the time travel that is depicted in Tenet might seem pretty gimmicky at first, might seem overcomplicated, but in actuality, if time travel ever happens, that is how it might happen. It's because it's not accelerated time. It doesn't involve creating a black hole or a wormhole or passing through the dimensions, which is more of speculation. Of course, the inverted things is a bit stretched, but if we were to go past in time, more often than not, it is going to resemble the way it is shown in the film. What do I mean by it? The idea that we can go backwards in time and have sort of a different entropy is an idea that hasn't been explored in film so far. And I would think that it has been lying there all along. And I am actually glad that a director like Christopher Nolan, who with all his technological trappings and storytelling ability is the first person to actually depict something like that on screen. And I find that this makes Tenet not just a film on its own, a wonderful piece of art, to me at least, but a film that is going to redefine how we think about time travel in general. And that's what makes me hopeful and happy at the same time. Thanks for watching this video. Subscribe for more such videos like this, or probably not like this, because every video in my channel somehow is pretty different from each other. But I guess I try to make things interesting. I fail most of the times, you have to keep that in mind. But if it is good, it might be worth your time. So consider subscribing, and thanks for watching this video. So what does this all mean? I don't know why I started with that much energy. I'll just tone it down.